Welcome to this Rutgers Cooperative Extension Community Gardening Program. This presentation is the first lecture in our Community Gardening series. My name is Madeline Flayhive DiNardo, and I am the County Agricultural Agent with Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Union County. It's a pleasure to be with you today to talk about starting a community garden. I am glad you are interested in community gardening. It's a great way for people to work together and provide fresh vegetables for their families and community. We're going to discuss the types of vegetable gardens. Options could be traditional in-the-ground gardens or raised bed gardens. We'll talk about site considerations such as the soil conditions, water resources, and fencing. How to prepare a site for a community garden. Once it's planted, how do you maintain it? We'll finish with tips on developing a budget for your community garden. Traditional gardens require a bit more maintenance than a raised bed. Weeding must be done more frequently. At planting, depending on the size of the area, you may need a rototiller. A rototiller is a machine, usually gas-powered, that is used to turn the soil. They can often be rented from garden centers, hardware stores, or large retail stores that carry lawn and gardening equipment. Know the history of the site. If it was once an industrial site or a business that used chemicals, such as a dry cleaner, it would be wise to have the soil tested for other contaminants. The samples would need to be tested by a state-certified environmental testing lab. You will need to let the lab know what type of contaminant you suspect. These tests can be expensive, so using raised beds or containers filled with fresh, clean soil would be a good alternative for a site you suspect the soil may be contaminated. If you are considering planting your community garden directly into existing soil, it is very important to have the soil tested for lead. The Rutgers Soil Testing Laboratory offers this service for a fee. The Rutgers Soil Testing Laboratory also offers standard fertility tests that reveal the soil pH, which is the acidity or alkalinity of the soil, and nutrient levels. You will receive recommendations for adjusting the soil pH and types of fertilizers to use. One soil fertility kit will cover a large area, providing the soil in the entire area has the same history, such as the soil texture, liming, and fertilization practices. Lab submission forms and directions on how to take a soil sample are available on the soil testing website, or you can purchase mailer kits from your local Rutgers Cooperative Extension office. It is very important to fill out the lab submission form completely. A separate sample should be taken of problem areas. The results will give recommendations for adjusting soil pH for optimum vegetable growth. If the pH is too low, liming may be recommended. If the pH is too high, there will be recommendations for lowering the pH. The Rutgers soil test results will also give recommendations for types of fertilizer to use, application rates, and timing. Raised beds are more accessible to people with disabilities. The height of the bed can be adjusted for wheelchairs or walkers. For efficient use of space, don't make the beds more than 3 to 4 feet wide so that gardeners can easily reach across the width. The length depends on the space available. Raised beds can be made from white oak, black locust, fir, or pine. Cedar is expensive but lasts longer than other materials. Avoid using pressure-treated wood. Cylinder blocks, bricks, or slates can also be used. Raised bed kits made of plastic material are available from garden supply companies and in garden centers and large retail stores. Raised beds can be easier to maintain compared to in-ground vegetable gardens. Using weed fabric over beds helps retain soil moisture and makes weeding an easier task. Here we have raised beds with an A-frame installed for vining crops such as sweet peas and beans. Trellises also give vining crops more room to grow. Whether you are planting a traditional in-ground vegetable garden or raised bed garden, there are things you need to consider for both types of community gardens. The site should be as level as possible and drain well. This community garden site has a slight slope, so raised beds were placed in the flattest area, which was towards the top of the picture. Avoid areas that are prone to flooding. Flood water ruins crops by making them unsafe to eat, even after the water has receded. Make sure the water to be used for the vegetable garden is potable, which means safe for drinking, and that it will be easy to access. Consider having the water tested. Here are some recommendations. For your municipal water source, just refer to the municipal water report. Well water should be tested annually. Harvested rainwater, test before harvest for generic E. coli and treat if necessary. For surface water, test at the beginning of the season, mid-growing season, and again just before harvest. An example of surface water would be water from a pond. It is convenient to have access to electricity. Lighting for security is a plus. If gardeners will be driving to your community garden, make sure there is parking available. Vegetable crops need adequate sunlight to produce a good crop. Most vegetables that form fruits, such as tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, and herbs, need 8 hours of direct sunlight. Flowering plants, such as sunflowers, nasturtium, and zinnias, prefer full sun. Vegetables that grow beneath the soil, root crops like carrots, beets, and leeks, need 5 to 6 hours of direct sunlight for their above-ground foliage to grow well. Leafy vegetables, like your lettuces and spinach, can do well with 4 to 5 hours of direct sunlight. Keep in mind that the sun rises in the east, moves across the southern sky, and sets in the west. Having your garden in a location that maximizes time in direct sunlight is ideal. In the back of a north side facing building would not be an ideal location. Locating a garden on the east or south facing side of a building would have early morning sun on the east side and daytime sunlight on the south facing side. The west side of the building would receive light later in the afternoon as the sun is setting. Identify trees in the area. Avoid walnut trees as they may be toxic to many vegetable plants. Walnut trees produce an allelopathic chemical called juglone that can inhibit the growth of other plants. Some walnut trees produce more of this chemical than others. For example, black walnuts produce more juglone than English walnuts. Tomatoes, eggplant, and potatoes are sensitive to juglone. Some symptoms of the plants that are affected by juglone are yellowing, stunting, and worst case scenario, death of the plant. Shallow roots of maples and other trees in the garden may make it difficult for digging and planting. Locating the garden furthest away from trees may be best for the vegetables, but there won't be much shade for gardeners to enjoy. It is a New Jersey state law that you contact New Jersey One Call Center before doing any excavation, including planting a vegetable garden. This regulation is for safety. Damaging a utility line, such as gas, electric, phone, or water line, can cause serious injury. The person responsible for the digging may have to pay for any damages. New Jersey One Call should be notified 5 business days before the proposed excavation, but not more than 10 days ahead. They request that the proposed excavation area be marked out with white spray paint. You may want to make the markout area a little bigger in case you need to make some adjustments in your plan for utility lines. Check with your town clerk or zoning office in the municipality your community garden is located in about ordinances regarding fencing. You may need a permit from the municipality to construct a fence around a garden. Municipal ordinances have regulations regarding fence heights, materials, setback from property lines, use of electric fences, and other fence-related issues. The fence should ideally be excavated 2 to 3 feet below the soil surface to keep out small burrowing animals. Hardware cloth is good for keeping out small animals. If you are considering using electric fencing, check with your municipality for local regulations. Deer fencing needs to be at least 8 to 10 feet high. Local regulations may not permit this height, so again, it is very important to consult with the municipality. Fencing does not need to be an expensive option. This raised bed with 4 metal posts at the corners with chicken wire wrapped around it. The chicken wire can easily be removed to work in the garden. Chicken wire is good for keeping out rabbits and squirrels. Smaller animals, such as mice or voles, may be able to get through, but a finer mesh, such as a hardware cloth wrapped around the base of the fence, can discourage those animals from getting a snack from your garden. Here is an example of actual cost to install a fence around a community garden in Union County. This fence was designed to keep out small animals. It would not be tall enough to keep out deer. Remember, check with local ordinances. You may need a permit to install a fence. You can manually remove leaves and turf growing on the site. Some gardeners may choose a one-time use of a non-selective herbicide to prepare the site. Do not use a soil sterilant or a herbicide that has a residual, which means a long-lasting control. These herbicides may injure the new plants you are growing in your community garden. Follow your soil test recommendations for lime, if needed, and fertilizers. Adding organic matter such as compost, composted manure, or peat moss can improve the condition of the soil. Note, if your lead soil test results indicate that lead levels are in the safe range and there is a low risk of contamination, you can use that native soil for raised beds and supplement it with compost or peat moss. If the lead levels are not in the safe range, put down a heavy weed fabric and build the raised beds over the heavy fabric. Fill with clean topsoil that has been tested for lead, or use containers with fresh potting mix. Think ahead about what tools you will need to put the beds together. You may need a Phillips or flathead screwdrivers, pliers, levels, hammers, charged drills, backup batteries for your drills, screws, nails, etc. If purchasing topsoil, have it tested ahead of time if possible. The Rutgers Soil Testing Lab does offer a topsoil evaluation test. Avoid using compost-only products to fill the beds, as it will not have the nutrients or structure and texture needed to support healthy root growth. A topsoil compost mixed would be a better option than straight compost. Using some type of mulch in your garden has many benefits. It prevents disease pathogens from splashing on the leaves, it maintains soil moisture, and insulates the soil from extreme temperatures. Mulching is a great way to keep weeds down. Weed block fabric over the soil is a good option. It keeps weeds down and protects the soil from lead dust. This gardener is using a red plastic block material. The weed block material is placed over the soil in the raised bed or on a garden row and secured with landscape pins or small stakes. To plant, simply cut a hole in the fabric the size of the plant's container circumference, or make an individual X-slit in the fabric for each plant and fold it back to plant the vegetable transplant. Avoid using hardwood mulches directly in beds, as they could tie up nitrogen in the soil. Organic matter that are suitable for a mulch include straw, but be careful of weed seed content, or black and white print newspaper. Another option is untreated, meaning no pesticide or weed killers applied, grass clippings. Occasionally rake the grass clippings to prevent them from, quote, matting, which means drying out and sticking together. It is very difficult for water to penetrate through the mat. Cool season crops include, but are not limited to, lettuce, kale, spinach, radish, chard, and broccoli. They can be planted around April 15th and then again in the late summer as the weather begins to cool down. Warm season crops include tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, squash, okra, and herbs. They should not be planted outdoors until after May 15th, when the danger of a spring frost has passed. Most vegetable crops need 1 inch of water a week. A rain gauge can be used to keep track of how much water Mother Nature has supplied. Plants in containers or raised beds may need more water as they can dry out quickly. Watering early in the day assures the foliage dries by nightfall and less water is lost to evaporation during the latter hotter parts of the day. Avoid overhead watering as much as possible to prevent the spread of fungal diseases. Drip irrigation or soaker hoses are a good option. Weeds can be a major challenge in a community garden if they are not consistently managed. Weeds serve as harbors for insect pests and disease and compete with your crops for water and nutrients. Frequent cultivation with hand tools when weed plants are small is much easier than removing full-grown weeds. Removing weeds before they flower will prevent them from producing seeds, which may germinate the next growing season or, in some cases, for years to come. Some gardeners may decide to use a pre-emergent herbicide in their garden. They should carefully read the product label to make sure it can be used in a vegetable garden. They may not be able to start vegetables from seed directly in the garden when using such products. Community garden organizations may set regulations for weed control regarding which types of weed management are allowed. How much does it cost to build and maintain a community garden? Let's take a look at two community garden sites, the Blue Garden and the Red Garden. Each community garden group decided to use raised beds in their garden. Deciding how big to make the beds lengthwise depends on available space, but remember, you don't want the width to be more than 3 or 4 feet. How much funding do you have available for your community garden? And very important, how many gardeners you have to maintain the site. Here is a short list of items you may need to get your community garden started. Available space and funding are important considerations. Here is a scenario for community garden number 1, the Blue Garden. How do we come up with the amount of lumber and soil needed for each raised beds and the amount of chicken wire needed to surround each individual bed? To determine how much lumber you will need to build each raised bed, find the perimeter of the bed, which is twice the width plus twice the length. You will also need corner joists to hold the lumber together. Prices of corner joists vary. Sometimes they are sold in a set of 2, so you may need to order 2 sets per bed. Be sure that the size corner joists match the dimensions of the lumber you are purchasing. In this case, 2 inches by 8 inch boards are cut into 3-foot and 12-foot lengths. The first step is to find the area of the bed in cubic feet. The equation for that is the width times the length times the height. For a bed that is 3 feet wide by 12 feet long and 8 inches deep, we need to have each side measured in the same unit of measurement. So for this example, let's have each measurement in feet. 8 inches divided by 12 inches, 1 foot, equals 0.66 feet. So our equation is 3 feet times 12 feet times 0.66 feet equals 23.76 cubic feet. So let's just round that number up to 24 cubic feet. We figured out how many cubic feet each bed is, so how much soil will we need to order? Soil in bulk is usually sold by the cubic yard. We know how many cubic feet each bed is, but how do we translate that into cubic yards of soil? A cubic yard of soil is 27 cubic feet, and we need 24 cubic feet per bed. 24 divided by 27 equals 0.88 cubic yards of soil per bed. We have 5 beds to fill, so 0.88 times 5 equals 4.4 cubic yards. For the order, we will need to round that number up to 5 cubic yards to be sure we don't run short of soil. Extra soil can be used in other parts of the community garden, such as a flower garden, or mixed with amendments to use for container gardens. Fencing does not have to be an expensive option. This raised bed has 4 metal posts at the corners with chicken wire wrapped around it. The chicken wire keeps out small animals like squirrels or rabbits. The chicken wire can be easily removed to work in the garden. To determine how much chicken wire you will need to fence each raised bed, find the perimeter of the bed, which is twice the width plus twice the length. You will also need 4 metal posts for each corner of the bed to hook the chicken wire onto to make the fence. We will need 30 feet of chicken wire per bed. Chicken wire is available at farm supply and hardware stores, garden centers, and large retail stores. Metal posts will last longer than wooden stakes. Now let's figure out a budget for the red garden. Using the same calculations we used for Garden 1, the blue garden, we will determine what we need to budget for this garden. To determine how much lumber you will need to build each raised bed, find the perimeter of the bed, which is twice the width plus twice the length. You will also need the corner joists to hold the lumber together. Remember, these prices may vary. Sometimes they are sold in sets of 2, so you may need to order 2 sets per bed. We will need to order 78 feet of lumber. Be sure that the size corner joists match the dimension of the lumber you are purchasing. In this case, 2-inch by 8-inch boards will be cut into 3-foot and 10-foot lengths. The first step is to find the area of the bed in cubic feet. The equation for that is width times length times height. For a bed that is 3 feet wide by 10 feet long and 8 inches deep, we need to have each side measured in the same unit of measurement. So for this example, let's have each measurement in feet. 8 inches divided by 12 inches, 1 foot, equals 0.66 feet. So our equation is 3 feet times 10 feet times 0.66 feet equals 19.8 cubic feet. So let's just round that number up to 20 cubic feet. We figured out how many cubic feet each bed is, so how much soil will we need to order? Soil in bulk is usually sold by the cubic yard. We know how many cubic feet each bed is, but how do we translate that into cubic yards of soil? A cubic yard of soil is 27 cubic feet, and we need 20 cubic feet per bed. So 20 divided by 27 equals 0.74 cubic yards of soil per bed. So 3 beds times 0.74 cubic yards equals 2.22 cubic yards. But we will round that number up to 2.5 or 3 cubic yards. It would be very difficult to measure exactly 2.22 cubic yards of bulk soil. Extra soil can be used in other parts of the community garden, such as a flower garden, or mixed with amendments to use for container gardens. To determine how much chicken wire you will need to fence each raised bed, find the perimeter bed, which is twice the width plus twice the length. You will also need 4 metal posts for each corner of the bed to hook the chicken wire onto to make your fence. We will need 26 feet of chicken wire per bed. We will need a total of 78 feet of chicken wire and 12 metal posts to fence the 3 raised beds. Chicken wire is usually sold in rolls of 50 or 100 feet. Let's compare the costs of building raised beds for garden number 1, the blue garden, and with 5 raised beds, and garden number 2, the red garden, with 3 raised beds. Remember, the length of the blue garden beds are longer than the beds in the red garden. These community gardens decided to use cedar boards for the raised beds. Cedar is typically more expensive than other untreated wood options, such as pine, but tends to last longer. When you prepare your budget, you may also need to include a delivery charge for lumber and soil. Another option for raised beds is to purchase prefabricated beds. They may be made from lumber or plastic materials. The kits usually have all the materials you need to put the beds together, such as corner joists or other hardware. These sample prices are per bed. To figure out how much soil you would need to fill each prefabricated bed, you would use the same calculations we used for garden number 1 and garden number 2. Note that this budget includes the items typically needed to maintain the garden, such as mulching materials and tools for watering. We saw examples of red tomato plastic mulch and wee block fabric earlier in the presentation when we talked about mulching. Your budget may also need to include gardening tools such as shovels, trowels, and rakes. The price of these items will vary. In some situations, gardeners may bring tools from home. In a school situation, it would be good to have tools available for students to use. In our example of a budget, we're going to budget $100 for each garden. How do you plan on watering the garden? Both these community garden groups opted to use soaker hoses. The community gardens needed to purchase garden hose to connect soaker hoses to faucets located on a nearby building. In this part of the budget, we included our supplies for protecting the gardens from wildlife damage, the rolls of chicken wire, and metal posts. Our totals for other items are $351.61 for garden number 1 and $277.71 for garden number 2. Use your soil test results to determine what types of amendments you will need. And don't forget to include the cost of the soil test kits. Remember, you will want to do 2 tests, one for lead and one for soil pH and fertility. This budget assumes that you needed to add lime for garden number 1 and none for garden number 2. The soil test result will tell you how many pounds of lime to apply per 100 square feet. Your soil test results may reveal that you don't need to purchase lime. The results will recommend what types of fertilizer to use. Our total cost for community garden number 1, the 5 3-foot by 12-foot by 8-inch deep beds was lumber and corner joists, $700.37, supplies, $351.61, soil and amendments, $268.45, for a grand total of $1,320.43. For community garden number 2, where we had the 3-foot by 10-foot by 8-inch deep beds, the total costs were lumber and corner joists, $427.62, supplies were $277.71, soil and amendments was $165.53, for the grand total of $870.86. Don't forget to include plants in your budget. There are many options for obtaining plants for the garden. Vegetable plants and flowers that have been grown from seed in a commercial greenhouse are available at local garden centers and other retail stores. Some gardeners enjoy growing their own transplants from seed. Some basic supplies needed to start vegetables and flowers from seed are the seeds, potting mix, trays or cell packs, and plant lights. Another option is to plant seeds directly into the ground or into the raised beds. Be sure to check the seed label for recommended times to seed directly into the soil. There are other items that are important to have readily available at the community garden site, especially a first aid kit. The hand wash station pictured here costs less than $20. It is a water jug with a spout, bungees to keep the paper towels on top, and a bucket to catch the gray water or soapy water. So I hope you have learned about choosing a site for your community garden, preparing the site, how to maintain it, and have some ideas of what items you will need, and also be able to develop a budget for your community garden. This presentation was developed by a team of Rutgers Cooperative Extension faculty and staff. Thank you for attending this Rutgers Cooperative Extension program. We have more detailed presentations on composting, pest and disease management, harvesting, and food safety in your community garden. We would be glad to present to your organization. Rutgers Master Gardeners are trained volunteers who provide research-based information from Rutgers Cooperative Extension, the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station. Rutgers Master Gardeners operate a garden helpline in their local county Rutgers Cooperative Extension office that you can call, email, or visit. You are welcome to bring samples of vegetable plant problems and insects to the office for identification and management advice. Rutgers Master Gardeners are a great educational resource for your community garden. We wish you the best harvests in your community garden.